This video is sponsored by Squarespace. Do you love painting miniatures but lack the attention span to actually finish anything? Have you tried various speed painting methods but find that they either bore you to tears or give you that high quality look that will satisfy your gaming partner? Well, look no further, as we here at Howl Corp have patented a brand new system of painting that is just for you, the viewer of this special broadcast, who I love and cherish specifically over all other viewers. Welcome to the WMOLF system, a 5-step system for painting miniatures designed to give you high contrast, vibrant results in a reasonable amount of time, without any special tools like spray cans, airbrushes, or oil paints. Are you ready to change your life by accepting Howl Corp's patented miniature painting system into your home and into your heart? Well, come along with me, dear friend, as I take you into the deep, dark heart of the WMOLF system. Step 1. White prime. As we all know, when priming a model, there are upsides and downsides to each method. Priming in black might give you deeper shadows, but it can be more of a challenge to get those brighter colors overall. Meanwhile, a white prime or a zenithal prime can make it easier to get those vibrant colors, but sacrifices those deep shadows, or you have to figure out some way to add those shadows after the fact. A sort of in-between method like Slap Chop attempts to give you the best of both worlds, but it relies heavily on your dry brushing skills to avoid getting that chalky look, and doing that can take a lot of time and attention. So for this method, I've decided to also try to get the best of both worlds, but without relying on dry brushing. So we're going to start with a bright white prime on our miniatures and worry about the shadows at step 3. And for this method, you don't need an airbrush, you don't even need spray cans or a well-ventilated area to do your priming. If you have those methods and you like them, feel free to use them, but because the WMOLF system is all about lowering the barriers of entry to get high quality results, I'm going to recommend that me and the rest of you just use a brush-on primer. Using a brush-on primer is quick, it's easy, anyone can do it, and I like to get through a ton of these models while I'm doing other things like watching a television show, watching a movie, or insert other beloved human activities here. And the way I like to apply this is sort of like a heavy dry brush to the model. And our goal is to hit as many of the raised areas as possible with 2 or 3 coats of this primer, while not worrying too much about getting primer into every recess of the model, as the main purpose of primer is just getting your paint to adhere better to the model. There's no reason you necessarily need to cover the entire model in primer if you're not relying on it for your shading. And in fact, not getting your primer into those deep crevices is actually going to make the shading step a little bit easier, because we're not clogging up those deep recesses with thick primer. Once your models are nice and primed with that white brush on primer, we can move on to step 2, metallics. One of the things that I often find is challenging to fit into a miniature painting workflow are metallics, as using true metallics can often be a multi-step workflow in and of themselves, and it can often be hard to decide at which point should you put the metallic paints on your models. For this system, I have decided to do it first thing right after priming the models. And we do this for 2 main reasons. Number 1, you don't have to stay inside the lines with your metallics if you do them this early in the workflow. Just do your best, but if there is some overspill, don't worry about it, as we can clean that up really easily at the next step. Step 3, overshading. So for step 3 in this process, we are going to apply washes to every part of the model. And for this step, you can use whatever washes you might like. Personally, I often will just use watered down contrast or speed paints for this part of the method, as what we're looking for is some really vibrant shadows that are going to complement our base colors. And the key to this method is to picture in your mind what kind of shadow you want for each base color on the model. If you want this to be a bit of a speedier process, you can just use a single color wash for this part of the method, But if you want to get the most bang for your buck out of this method, I'm going to recommend that you picture what the base colors will be on the model, and then pair that with an interesting shade color. So for instance, if you're painting red, you could absolutely just use a darker red for your overshade color. But to get the most out of this method, I'm going to recommend you use something a little bit different, a little bit interesting. Are some parts of your model going to be yellow? Try using a pink as the shade color. Have any blue parts on your model? Try using purple. And if you're not sure which shading colors are going to pair well with which base colors, I'm going to recommend you check out our reference document over at howlcorp.com, where a few months ago, me and Brent made this chart where we tested out which shade colors pair best with which base colors. And luckily, it was extremely easy to put this reference document together using this video's sponsor, Squarespace. Squarespace is the all-in-one website and hosting platform that I have been using for a bit over a decade now for all of my website needs. And it's extremely easy to use. You can just pick from one of their gorgeously designed pre-made templates, add in any extra pages or features that you might like, and then customize your website to your heart's content using their extremely intuitive drag and drop grid system. No coding or technical knowledge required. I've been using my current Squarespace website over at howlcorp.com to house a gallery of my painted miniatures, all of my painting reference documents, as well as an online store. And I've been really happy with the results so far. So if you need a website, why not check out squarespace.com today for a free trial. And when you're ready to launch, go to squarespace.com/DanaHowell for 10% off your very first purchase of a website or domain. So yeah, go and check out that page if you'd like some ideas for interesting shade colors to add to your models. But basically, we're going to do all of our shading up front, thinking about what colors are going to be on our model, and then picking interesting shade colors for them to complement those base colors. And we're doing this all right now up front, so that we don't have to worry about any of our shading later on in the process. And at this point, because we already have all of our metallics on the model, we can also shade our metallics at the same time as well. And once you give your models a little bit of time to dry after you apply these washes, I'd recommend at least 10 minutes just to make sure, we can move on to step 4, layer up. And this step is pretty simple and can take as little time or as much time as you might want it to. All we're going to do at this point is apply our base colors to the model, as well as any highlight layers we might want on top of that. But it's going to be a lot easier than just layering on top of a black, white, or even zenithal undercoat, as all of our shadows are now taken care of. All our metallics are done, and all of the raised areas that we need to apply base colors to already have a nice bright undercoat surrounded by a shadow. So from this point forward, painting your models suddenly becomes as easy as coloring within the lines of a coloring book. And while you could use a number of methods to apply your base coat at this step, including traditional layering methods, the method I like to use for applying my base colors at this stage is a technique that I outlined a few months ago in a previous video that I like to call scrambling. And while some naysayers in the comments section have told me that what I'm doing here is essentially just overbrushing, I actually find that I disagree, as overbrushing is more like a heavy dry brush where you don't remove nearly as much paint from your brush before applying it, but scrambling, or whatever you want to call it, uses a much smaller brush and relies on using the side of your brush to apply your coats of paint, and actually shares a lot more in common with edge highlighting than dry brushing. But regardless of what you'd like to call the technique, you can see in the footage on screen right now how I approach applying paint using this method. I'm using a medium-sized brush and a thicker paint, removing about half of the paint on a paper towel, and then using just the edge of my brush to apply the colors within the designated sections where I want to have those colors. Once this is done, you can use a highlight color or two on top of each section if you do want to layer up your highlights even further. But I find that for most figures, especially if you're painting large batches of troops in an army, just the base coat is often enough, aside from maybe applying one or two highlights to points of interest like the face. At this point, you can also apply highlights to your metallics if you want, just by reapplying the base color of the metallics to the most raised areas. I find is often enough. And when you're satisfied with the way your model looks, we can move on to step 5, finishing touches. As always, this might vary by model, but for me, 2 of the most common finishing touches that I find are worth my time at this stage are facial details and glazing. For facial details, this is often the stage where I will add a little bit more attention to the faces of the models. Things like painting on the eyes, a little bit of makeup, or a little bit of stubble onto the faces is often what I find myself doing here. After this, I will often add some glazing to tie the whole model together. And more specifically, I like to often add a fluorescent glaze to a few parts of the model that I want to really pop or stand out. As always, of course, use whatever colors you want for this, but personally, I have recently really been enjoying the new Viejo game color line of fluorescents for this process, as they are nice and bright, very saturated, but also very, very thin and almost already a glazing consistency. So the way I would do this is I just apply it over whatever areas I want to be brighter and more saturated. If let's say I want these reds to be more saturated, I might apply a little bit of fluorescent pink just to help it pop. And then I will wipe off the excess with a damp brush, and you can see it makes quite a difference overall and helps tie all the colors on the model together. If instead you wanted a more grimy or grimdark look, you can of course do the same thing with a darker color at this stage as well, applying an overall glaze of it to the model and then wiping off the excess to help tie all of the colors on the model together. For darker glazes, I would recommend you mix your paint with some sort of medium that slows down the drying time or makes it easier to remove. Anything like a glaze medium or a drying retarder should work well for this. In this case, I'm testing out this new product called Noosh from Monument Hobbies, and it does seem to work pretty well for this sort of overall glaze type of use, but I will be revisiting this product and hopefully doing a full review on it in the future. Beyond adding glazing and facial details, I often like to add my basing details at this point. In this case, I'm just adding some grass tufts and painting them with more vibrant colors to match the retro saturated vibe that I am going for with these old world models. And that's pretty much it. This is a very simple method, and it's probably not anything revolutionary to some of you, but it is the way I find I've been approaching painting a lot of things lately, especially larger armies. So I thought it was worth sharing with you, my very special favorite viewer. Nobody else will see this video, just you. It's just for you specifically. So thank you for watching. If you'd like to see this video ad-free, gain access to our wonderful exclusive inclusive Discord server, or see your name in the credits scrolling by right now, you can do so over at patreon.com/DanaHowl, but because you're my very favorite viewer, I have to assume you're already over there and subscribed. So with all of that said, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video. Yeah, I know, it's not a revolutionary new painting system, it's called satire.